You know that feeling, that constant, low-level hum of modern life?
Mm-hmm.
The almost magnetic pull of your phone,
Hmm.
and this underlying sense that maybe, well, something's missing.
Oh, absolutely. You hear that a lot.
Turns out it's not just you. American and British kids are spending like half the time outdoors that their parents did.
Wow. Half.
Yeah. And here's a staggering stat. Get this. Up to 7 hours a day glued to screens.
7 hours.
And that doesn't even count school.
Ah.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit.
It's interesting, isn't it? We all have this kind of gut feeling that a walk in nature makes us feel better, calmer, you know?
Totally.
But this deep dive isn't just about those feelings, right? We've got a stack of research here, and we're using Florence Williams's book, The Nature Fix, as our main guide, really, to explore the science behind that intuition.
Right.
We're asking, what exactly is going on under the hood? What's happening in our brains and bodies?
Exactly. And for you, our listener, the learner,
Mm-hmm.
the person who wants to get informed quickly but thoroughly,
And loves those aha moments.
loves the aha moments. Yeah, without feeling totally bogged down. Consider this your express lane.
A shortcut through the science.
Pretty much.
Mm.
Our mission today is to distill the crucial knowledge, how and why nature impacts our well-being, our thinking, our creativity, even our social skills. We're moving beyond just nature is nice,
Right, beyond the anecdotal to the actual scientific bedrock.
Yeah.
And what's a really compelling starting point, actually, is Williams's own story.
Oh, yeah.
Her move from, like, a mountain city to the urban sprawl of Washington, D.C. wasn't just a change of scenery for her.
No?
No, it apparently ignited this personal quest to understand what happens when we shift from those natural rhythms to really intense urban environments.
It's almost ironic, isn't it? Because this isn't some new idea.
Not at all.
Think back, poets, philosophers, they were onto this ages ago. Aristotle pacing around outdoors to sharpen his thinking.
Darwin, Tesla, Einstein, all finding inspiration in their gardens, apparently.
Even Teddy Roosevelt,
Mm.
the ultimate doer, right? He'd disappear into the wilderness for months.
It does raise a key question, though. If this insight is so ancient, why this big modern scientific surge now?
Good point.
The Nature Fix points to something like a mass generational amnesia about nature's power.
Amnesia.
Yeah, kind of fueled by our increasingly urban lives and, well, the constant lure of digital screens. We're maybe just not immersed enough anymore to truly remember how good it feels.
Or how vital it is.
Yeah, how vital it is, exactly.
But now, as you said, science is stepping in to quantify this stuff. It's not just about feeling a bit more relaxed after a walk in the park.
Right. Scientists are measuring tangible impacts on mood, sure, but also on core cognitive functions.
Like memory.
Memory, planning, creativity, focus, even that really important daydreaming ability.
Huh. Daydreaming.
Yeah. And it even touches on how we interact with each other, our social skills. As the book highlights, this isn't just about individual well-being.
Bigger than that.
It's potentially about the health of our societies.
Yeah.
What's quite striking when you look at it is the sheer scale of our move indoors. Our daily existence is just radically different from, like, 99.9% of human history.
99.9%. That's hard to wrap your head around.
It really is. And this has profound implications for our nervous systems. Miyazaki, one of the researchers mentioned, points out they evolved in the savanna, in the forest.
Not navigating concrete canyons and staring at glowing rectangles.
Precisely. It's not about ditching our devices entirely, of course, but understanding the weight of this massive shift. Williams reminds us that 2008 was this watershed year.
What happened in 2008?
That was the moment Homo sapiens officially became a majority urban species.
Wow.
Yeah.
Officially urban. It's almost unbelievable how fast things have changed.
Yeah.
The book shares this really vivid snapshot, doesn't it, about the author's brothers-in-law.
Oh, the Green River trip, yeah.
Just college kids taking off on a 3-week, pretty much unplanned trip down the river.
Imagine that today.
Right. Apparently the main concern back then was maybe getting a slap on the wrist for not wearing a life jacket. The idea of young adults just vanishing into the wilderness for weeks feels almost like ancient history now.
That story really highlights how structured and, well, regulated our access to and experience of deep nature has become.
Yeah.
It contrasts so sharply with a time when that kind of immersive connection was perhaps just a more normal part of growing up or of life.
Mm-hmm.
And this kind of brings us neatly to practices like Shinrin-yoku.
Ah, forest bathing. I've definitely heard about this. Sounds wonderfully simple, almost meditative. What's the core idea?
Shinrin-yoku is Japanese, yeah. The term itself was coined by the government back in 1982, but its roots go much deeper into Shinto and Buddhist traditions.
Okay.
It's essentially about intentionally taking in the atmosphere of the forest through all five senses, not just looking, but smelling, listening, touching.
Fully immersing yourself.
Exactly. The book describes this specific experience in a Sugi pine grove, the textures, the smells, even the taste of a wasabi root and bark tea they had.
Wow. Okay.
And interestingly, even this relatively gentle form of nature immersion was shown to measurably lower blood pressure in the participants.
So real physiological changes. It's like our bodies have this innate recognition, right? The book touches on this idea of an evolutionary mismatch,
That's a key concept.
that we're not living in the environment we were, designed for.
Precisely. As Miyazaki explains it, our physiology spent millennia adapting to the rhythms of the natural world. These natural outdoor environments engage all five senses in a way that just feels inherently right.
Like plugging back in.
Almost like plugging back into some fundamental energy source, yeah.
Yeah.
It makes us feel fully physically alive and at home in a way that, let's face it, urban environments often don't. Williams quotes John Muir.
The naturalist.
Yeah, he worried we degenerate into mere machines for making money if we lost that connection to wilderness.
And that constant hum of the city you mentioned, that always-on feeling.
Yeah.
It has a real tangible effect on our brains, doesn't it? Not just a feeling.
The research discussed in the book strongly suggests that the chronic, sort of low-grade stress of urban living can actually alter brain structure and function
How so?
in ways that might increase vulnerability to conditions like schizophrenia, anxiety, and various mood disorders. It's a powerful point about how our surroundings are actively shaping our neurobiology.
That's sobering. Now, one of the really intriguing areas you mentioned is the science of phytoncides.
Ah, yes, the evergreen scents.
What's the story there? It sounds almost like aromatherapy, but with more science.
Sort of. Dr. Lee's research in Japan has been fascinating. He's found that phytoncides, these are volatile organic compounds released by trees, especially evergreens,
Right.
might have some really remarkable effects. His studies have shown an increase in natural killer cells, NK cells.
Which are good for immunity, right?
Exactly. And anti-cancer proteins in people exposed to these compounds. They even saw similar effects in lab experiments just using the compounds.
Wow.
Now, the million-dollar question, of course, is whether it's the aromatic molecules themselves doing the heavy lifting, or if it's simply the overall stress reduction that comes with being in a peaceful forest setting.
Right. Cause and effect. Hard to untangle.
Very hard. And it's interesting to compare the Japanese approach, which is very much about that full sensory immersion, the smells, the sights, the sounds, with some American research that often focuses more narrowly, maybe just on visual exposure to nature pics or, brief walks on campus green spaces.
It sounds like trying to isolate the magic ingredient of nature experience in a lab setting is a real challenge.
It absolutely is. As David Strayer, another key researcher, points out, there are just so many interwoven factors at play.
Like what?
Is it the nature itself? Is it the fresh air? Maybe just the break from our usual stressful routine? He talks about a potential recalibration of your senses that happens in nature.
A recalibration, I like that.
Yeah, like turning up the volume on our awareness. But he emphasizes, we really need more robust data to fully unravel exactly what's doing what.
Okay. We all know exercise is a huge boon for the brain.
Yeah.
How does that piece fit into this nature conversation?
Yeah, the book does touch briefly on Arthur Kramer's really significant work.
Yeah.
His research clearly shows how physical activity safeguards the brain against cognitive decline and even stimulates the growth of new brain cells, neurogenesis,
That's really important areas.
particularly in areas critical for memory and executive functions like the hippocampus. But while exercise often happens in nature, think hiking or trail running, the book's main focus here is really trying to isolate nature's direct, independent impact, separate from just the exercise component.
Got it. So let's zoom in on attention for a moment, because in our hyper-connected world, it feels like attention is this constantly besieged resource.
Yeah.
Like it's always under attack.
Precisely. Paul actually introduces this crucial idea of the attention economy.
Okay.
He explains how our brains are just constantly bombarded with information, right? And they're working incredibly hard all the time just to filter it all out.
So much filter.
So much. And directed attention, the kind we use for focused tasks like working or studying, is a finite resource. It literally depletes depletes our cognitive fuel. Our brains are primarily in the business of inhibition.
Inhibition, meaning blocking things out.
Exactly. Actively blocking out irrelevant stimuli, the notifications, the background noise, whatever, so we can concentrate on what's actually important in that moment.
Okay, so how does stepping into a natural environment give our poor, overtaxed attention systems a break?
Atchley's perspective, and this is central to attention restoration theory, is that natural settings, compared to our typical urban or work environments, present far fewer of those demanding distractions.
Less stuff vying for our attention.
Exactly. Fewer things you need to actively inhibit. This reduces the need for that constant mental filtering, freeing up our attentional capacity for deeper thought, reflection, maybe even creativity. There's a significant decrease in what's called cognitive load when you're in a natural setting.
That makes perfect sense. Less to actively tune out means more bandwidth left over. The book also discusses the brain's default network. What's the lowdown on that? Sounds important.
It is. So our brains have different networks that become more or less active depending on what we're doing. The executive function network kicks in for focused tasks, problem solving, that sort of thing.
Right.
The default mode network, or DMN, is more engaged when we're not focused on the outside world. Think daydreaming, mind wandering, reflecting on past experiences, thinking about the future, considering others' perspectives.
Kind of the brain's internal reflection space.
That's a great way to put it. And interestingly, spending time in nature seems to allow that effortful executive function to take a bit of a back seat.
It gets to relax a bit.
Yeah, it chills out, which gives the default network more room to operate. Think of it as the brain's idle mode, but it's an incredibly important idle mode, crucial for creativity, self-awareness, and personal insight.
Huh. So letting the mind wander in nature is actually productive. And there's something about the element of mystery in nature that's also beneficial, right? Like not seeing everything at once.
Yeah, this comes from the Kaplans, Stephen and Rachel, pioneers in this field. Their concept of mystery is key to what makes nature restorative.
Okay.
And researcher Terry Watson built upon this. His studies demonstrated that natural scenes with, say, winding paths or partially obscured views where you feel invited to explore further.
Like what's around that bend?
Exactly. Those scenes actually improved cognitive recall in study participants compared to more open, obvious scenes. It suggests that this subtle invitation to explore, the hint of something more just around the corner, positively engages our attention and memory without being demanding.
Fascinating. This is all really compelling theory and observation, but are we seeing actual measurable changes in our bodies when we're in nature, like concrete biomarkers?
That's the holy grail, isn't it? The quest for specific nature-related biomarkers is definitely ongoing. We know BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, is well established as a marker linked to exercise.
Right.
And researchers are actively looking for similar molecular signals directly related to nature exposure itself.
Anything promising yet?
Well, early MRI studies, even those just using photographs of nature versus urban scenes, are showing interesting patterns.
Like what?
Increased blood flow to brain regions associated with pleasure, empathy, and sort of unconstrained thinking when viewing nature, whereas urban images tend to trigger more activity in the amygdala,
Our fear center.
our fear and anxiety center, exactly. There are also some studies using techniques like FNIRs, which measures blood oxygenation, pointing to a drop in hemoglobin levels in the prefrontal cortex during time spent in nature, suggesting perhaps a quieting of that executive control center.
Interesting. So different brain activity patterns. The book also delves into forest therapy in Korea. How does that compare to the Japanese Shinrin-yoku we talked about? Similar vibe.
Similar, yes, but with maybe a slightly stronger emphasis on the potential medical benefits.
Okay.
The forest therapy centers in Korea, much like Shinrin-yoku, emphasize engaging all the senses in nature. But you hear more discussion there about the specific benefits of phytoncides for stress and blood pressure, and even geosmin.
Geosmin. What's that?
It's that earthy smell you get from soil after rain. Some research suggests it might have antiviral and possibly even anti-cancer properties.
Wow, the smell of dirt could be good for you.
Potentially. The guided experiences in Korea often involve deep breathing exercises, gentle stretches, and mindful observation of the natural world. It's often framed explicitly as a way to better understand our own inner landscape, using nature as a metaphor.
And it's catching on.
Apparently, yes. There's a growing trend of urban dwellers in Korea seeking out these forest retreats for weekend breaks, escaping the city's stress.
Makes sense.
Though it's a good reminder, as Williams experienced with one participant named Sepil, that individual physiological responses can vary. CPL actually had an initial stress response to the exercise involved, even though it was in nature. So it's not always a simple uniform effect.
Right. Individual differences matter. It's almost as if, on a grand scale, we're losing some of our innate connection to the natural world. The book even touches on our sense of smell declining.
Yeah, Sante Peiba's research, who won a Nobel Prize for other work, suggests that, evolutionarily speaking, humans are indeed losing their acuity and sense of smell.
Why?
It seems certain genes related to olfactory receptors are becoming inactivated. The theory is it's likely because smell is no longer as critical for our day-to-day survival in modern controlled environments.
But we don't need to sniff out predators or spoiled food as much.
Exactly. We refrigerate food, we have sanitation, etc. Williams connects this to the idea of self-domestication.
Self-domestication.
Yeah.
Like, we're taming ourselves.
Kind of, suggesting that our fast-firing sensory neurons, once crucial for navigating a wilder, more unpredictable world, have become somewhat relaxed or less sharp in our safer, more predictable modern lives.
And another sensory input, noise. That constant soundtrack of urban living, that definitely impacts our stress levels.
Hugely. And what's interesting is how our perception of noise and how it's framed can significantly influence our reaction.
How so?
If we find a noise irritating, like a neighbor's music, it amplifies our stress response. But studies show that when the same sound level is framed differently, maybe those airplanes overhead are part of important military exercises.
Giving it a purpose.
Exactly. People often report feeling less bothered, even if the decibel level is identical. Our attitude mediates the stress.
Fascinating. But natural sounds, the opposite of that urban cacophony birdsong, water flowing, they can actually be restorative, can't they?
Oh, absolutely. Research clearly indicates that natural sounds can be an effective antidote to stress and even symptoms of depression. They just seem to signal safety and calm to our brains.
But it's not always perfectly quiet in nature either.
True. And researcher Catherine Smith's work points out that for individuals with high noise sensitivity, even the benefits of being in a beautiful natural environment can be offset or reduced by unwanted sounds, maybe distant traffic, or even other people's noise.
So what can you do?
Smith recommends strategies like, obviously, noise reduction where possible, but also shifting our mindset or attitude towards unavoidable noise and actively seeking out positive natural sounds and genuinely quiet places.
Find your quiet spot.
Yeah. And initiatives like Silent Sunday in Phoenix, where they restrict noise in parks, or the restoration of the Cheongaishan stream in Seoul, bringing water sounds back into the city center, these are great examples of urban efforts to provide those calmer sonic landscapes.
It's not just about physically being in nature, is it? The book mentions even abstract art, like Pollock paintings.
Yeah, Richard Taylor's idea is pretty mind-bending. He proposes that Jackson Pollock's abstract paintings, with their seemingly chaotic splatters and drips, actually reflect the underlying mathematical principles of fractals.
Fractals, like in snowflakes and coastlines.
Exactly, those repeating patterns found throughout nature. Taylor believes our brains subconsciously recognize this inherent fractal geometry in Pollock's work, this kind of natural law, and that leads to calming and engaging effects.
Even without realizing why.
Even without consciously analyzing it, he suggests the effect can be quite passive just from being environmentally exposed to these patterns.
Wild. Okay, what about virtual nature? Can strapping on a VR headset and walking through a digital forest offer some of the same benefits?
That's a hot area of research. Dimitar Volchanov has been developing virtual reality environments specifically designed to be restorative.
And does it work?
His research using eye tracking technology is interesting. It suggests that our gaze behaves differently when viewing natural scenes compared to urban ones, even in VR. Our eyes linger less, scan more broadly in nature scenes.
What does that mean?
His theory is that the easily processed, non-threatening patterns in nature, the fractals again, perhaps even in VR, might trigger the release of natural opioids in the brain, activating our reward pathways and making us feel good, reducing stress.
So maybe VR nature is better than no nature.
It certainly seems plausible as a supplement, though likely not a full replacement for the real thing.
Right. Which sounds like, for a really deep recharge, a more immersive real-world experience might be necessary. The book mentions a fascinating Finnish concept.
Ah, yes, metsänpito.
Metsänpito.
Yeah, it translates roughly to forest cover or forest blanket. It represents this deeper, more complete surrender to the forest, going beyond just a quick walk or looking at a nice view.
Like really letting the forest envelop you.
Exactly. And many Finnish health experts apparently believe this kind of full immersion, even if it's infrequent, is really vital for mental well-being.
Do they have recommendations?
They even have informal guidelines suggesting something like 5 hours total per month spent in nature, or maybe a couple of 2 to 3 day trips outside the city per year to really tap into these deeper restorative benefits.
5 hours a month.
Mm.
That sounds achievable for many people. It's interesting to see how different cultures value this connection. In Scotland, it sounds like nature is being actively used as a tool to address some pretty serious social challenges.
Yeah, Scotland presents an interesting case. Despite its stunning landscapes, it faces real issues of unequal access to quality green spaces, particularly in more deprived urban areas.
So the green space might be there, but not accessible or inviting.
Right, or sometimes neglected woodlands can actually become sources of stress or fear rather than solace. But the Branching Out program is a powerful counterexample.
What does it do?
It uses structured woodland activities, conservation work, bushcraft, that kind of thing as a form of mental health care for people who are unemployed or struggling with addiction.
Wow, using the woods for therapy.
Essentially, yes. And the stories of individuals mentioned in the book, like Tom Gold and Richard Bolton, highlight the dedicated work being done on the ground to reconnect people with nature in communities like Glasgow, often facing significant social hardship.
It's not a completely novel idea, though, linking nature and mental health, is it? There seems to be a historical thread here.
No, it's not new. Historically, the connection has certainly been recognized, even if the science was fair. The book briefly touches on the moral treatment movement in 19th century asylums,
Mm.
which often incorporated access to gardens and nature as part of the healing environment. It also mentions Freud's perspectives on the psychological pressures of urban life and repression.
And later psychoanalysts.
Interestingly, Harold Searles recognized nature as a significant and useful object of transference in psychoanalysis way back in 1960, suggesting our relationship with the non-human world is deeply tied to our psyche.
And we see modern examples of nature being used very intentionally for therapy, like that garden in Sweden.
The Elmhorst Garden, yes, it's a fascinating, specialized therapeutic garden in Sweden.
What's its focus?
It's specifically designed for treating people with severe work-related stress, burnout, depression, often quite withdrawn individuals.
How does it work?
Through regular, structured gardening sessions several hours a week over a 12-week program. It highlights the potent therapeutic potential of actively engaging with the natural world, not just passively observing it.
Getting your hands dirty, literally. The book also brings in the poet Wordsworth and this idea of nature fostering resilience. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, this refers to Jeffrey Hartman's interpretation of Wordsworth. Hartman suggested that Wordsworth saw nature not just as beautiful, but as something that helps us build inner strength. By experiencing nature's cycles, its endurance, its beauty, it sort of prepares us psychologically to better absorb or overcome life's inevitable shocks and difficulties.
Nature as a teacher of resilience.
Exactly. And Hartman apparently found personal solace and resilience in reading Wordsworth's poetry during his own period of exile as a child, fleeing the Nazis, illustrating how even that symbolic connection with nature through art or literature can offer profound support.
That's powerful. And now scientists are getting even more direct, actually measuring brain activity while people are in nature, aren't they? With those portable EEG headsets.
Yes, exactly. Those portable EEG studies are yielding some really cool initial findings. Research conducted in Scotland, for example, showed lower levels of brainwave patterns associated with frustration and higher levels of patterns linked to meditation or calmness in volunteers when they were walking through a park compared to a busy street.
So real-time brain changes.
Real-time brain changes. And there's a larger study mentioned mobility, mood, and place, looking specifically at these connections in senior citizens. Williams herself even tried out one of these portable EEG units during a walk in Edinburgh.
She wore the headset.
Yeah, giving a first-hand account of what that's like and what the data looked like. It's still an emerging area, but very promising for understanding the immediate neurological effects.
And one really clear takeaway from this line of research, especially Strayer's work, seems to be the importance of actually disconnecting from our devices while we're out there.
Oh, hugely important. Strayer's research demonstrated this quite starkly.
What did it show?
It showed that while a walk in nature significantly boosted cognitive abilities like creativity and problem solving,
Right.
if participants used their phones or other technology during that same walk, those cognitive benefits completely disappeared. negated,
Wow, completely wiped out.
completely wiped out. This strongly supports the core ideas of attention restoration theory. To get the benefits, you need those key elements.
Mm.
Being away from your usual demands, experiencing soft fascination with your natural surroundings.
Soft fascination, meaning it holds your attention gently.
Exactly. It's interesting, but doesn't demand effortful focus. You also need to feel compatible with the landscape, like you fit there, and ideally be in a space that feels vast or offers a sense of extent, allowing the mind to rest and wander.
And multitasking with technology just keeps draining that limited attention resource.
Precisely. It prevents that mental restoration from happening. You're still filtering, still directing attention.
It's such a good reminder to just leave the phone in your pocket.
Oh,
Or better yet, at home. The author also shares a really poignant personal reflection about her own move to D.C. and finding a kind of solace walking in nature with her father.
yes, that personal anecdote really grounds the science, doesn't it? It underscores the simple yet powerful impact of those shared moments in nature, especially with loved ones. Williams notes her father's improved mood, his increased sentimentality during their walks,
Mm-hmm.
hinting at those deep, often unspoken connections between nature, emotion, memory, and our relationships.
Beautiful. The deep dive then takes us somewhere completely different, the stunning wilderness of Utah, and explores the powerful concept of awe.
Yeah, the experiences described in Utah's canyon country sound incredible. Being surrounded by that ancient rock art, those vast, humbling landscapes,
Must be amazing.
it apparently evoked really profound emotional responses in the students on the trips. Williams joined a genuine sense of awe.
And Strayer was trying to measure that.
Strayer's field experiment there, again using EEG, aimed to capture the neurological signature of this awe experience. He was specifically looking at midline frontal theta waves,
Okay.
hypothesizing they might see a quieting of the prefrontal cortex, less executive control, and perhaps an activation of the default network we talked about earlier.
What did they find?
Well, the initial results from Williams's own river trip, where she wore the EEG, actually showed lower theta wave activity in nature compared to baseline.
Lower. So the opposite of what they expected.
Kind of. It suggests maybe a different kind of brain engagement, perhaps less internal rumination and more outward focus, or maybe just a deeper calm. It highlights that there's still some mystery about exactly where that brain energy goes when we're immersed in awe-inspiring nature.
Still more to learn.
Yeah.
And the wilderness is even being used in a much more intensive therapeutic way to help people heal from deep trauma, like PTSD.
That section on the all-women's river trip on the Salmon River was incredibly moving.
For veterans with PTSD, right?
Yeah.
Sponsored by Higher Ground.
Yes, the goals were explicitly therapeutic, to facilitate emotional processing of trauma and also to build a strong sense of camaraderie and mutual support, all within the challenging but contained environment of a wilderness river trip.
Mm-hmm.
The book shares some of the participants' initial struggles, the real rawness of their experiences, and the profound, often debilitating impact PTSD has on their daily lives.
The neurological effects of intense fear and trauma are significant, aren't they?
Mm.
It can really hijack the brain.
Absolutely. Fear triggers this cascade of neurological and physiological responses: fight, flight, or freeze. With PTSD, the brain can become locked in a state of hypervigilance,
Always on alert.
always on alert. The amygdala, the brain's fear center, can become chronically overactive, making it incredibly difficult to distinguish between genuine threats in the present and echoes of past trauma. The ability to feel safe gets compromised.
But it seems like even small victories in that wilderness setting on the river trip could be incredibly transformative for these women.
Definitely. The book highlights these small but really significant positive experiences: successfully navigating a rapid, contributing to the group effort, managing moments of intense anxiety, finding moments of peace,
And being confident.
building confidence, experiencing competence, while acknowledging very realistically that a week on the river isn't a magic bullet cure for PTSD.
No quick fixes.
No quick fixes. For someone like Lopez, mentioned in the book, the feelings were complex, but the experience offered moments of empowerment, connection, and a sense of shared accomplishment. And therapist Rachel Scheinfeld's observations are key here, too.
What did she note?
She suggested that these kinds of wilderness therapy programs can be crucial in encouraging veterans to seek and, importantly, stick with more traditional forms of counseling afterward. It can be a catalyst for further healing.
That makes sense. It's also important to remember, as the book points out, that everyone's relationship with nature is unique, right? And for some, maybe longer, more immersive experiences are needed for deeper healing.
Absolutely. The book is careful to emphasize that individual responses vary widely. Nature isn't universally calming for everyone all the time. And for some individuals, particularly those dealing with deep-seated trauma like Lopez seemed to be, more extended periods of immersion might be what's truly needed to begin to process and heal at a deeper level.
Right. The conversation then shifts, quite importantly, to the role of nature in childhood development. This feels crucial.
It really does. The SOAR program described in the book sounds amazing.
What is it?
It uses activities like rock climbing and other wilderness challenges for children who might otherwise be labeled with ADHD.
Okay.
And it powerfully demonstrates the benefits of nature-based exploration, movement, and sensory engagement for these kids. It allows them to channel their energy constructively.
So reframes their restlessness.
Exactly. The book raises important questions about our tendency sometimes to pathologize what might be natural childhood restlessness or a need for more movement and sensory input. It brings in Jack Panksepp's research on rats, showing how restricting play and exploration in young animals actually hinders their frontal lobe development and their social skills. Play is serious developmental work.
And this connects to early education ideas, too.
Yeah. Froebel's original concept of kindergarten, literally children's garden, emphasized sensory absorption of the natural world and self-directed learning through play. This philosophy is still very much alive in many Scandinavian preschools and primary schools, with a huge emphasis on outdoor time, regardless of the weather.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
But the statistics here in the US and UK about the decline of outdoor play and the concurrent rise in mental health issues in kids, they're pretty alarming, aren't they?
They are deeply concerning. The significant increase in antidepressant use, even in preschoolers, and the well-documented rising rates of anxiety and depression among teenagers. It does suggest a worrying potential linked to the dramatic decrease in unstructured outdoor time and the increase in screen time.
It's hard to prove direct causation, obviously.
Very difficult. There are many factors involved. But the correlation is strong enough that it warrants serious attention and concern about the environments we're creating for children.
So, looking ahead, we know that more and more of us are living in cities. We're officially urban now. How do we ensure we still get the nature doses we clearly seem to need?
That's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? With a majority of the global population now residing in urban environments, Williams aptly terms us metro sapiens, and this trend only accelerating.
Right.
The critical challenge becomes, how can our increasingly dense urban habitats provide the necessary connections with the natural world for human flourishing? Can megacities be healthy habitats?
Singapore is presented as a really interesting, maybe even hopeful model in this regard.
Singapore is fascinating, yes. It's a hyper-dense city-state, but it has proactively, intentionally integrated nature into its urban fabric for decades.
Through specific policies.
Through its Garden City and now City in a Garden initiatives, a vision really championed by its founding leader, Lee Kuan Yew, they understood early on the value of green space.
And the benefits are
Manifold. Mitigating the urban heat island effect, improving air quality, managing stormwater, and crucially, significantly enhancing the psychological and physical well-being of its citizens. It shows density and nature can coexist.
I found Tim Beatley's concept of the nature pyramid a really helpful framework for thinking about this personally.
Me too. It's very practical. Beatley's nature pyramid offers a kind of recommended menu for incorporating the different scales of nature we need into our lives.
I break it down.
It ranges from daily micro-interactions with nearby nature, looking out a window at a tree, having plants indoors, walking through a leafy street. He calls these the daily vegetables.
Daily vegetables, I like that.
All the way up to less frequent but more immersive experiences in larger parks or wilder landscapes, the weekly or monthly servings, and the occasional feasts of deep wilderness immersion.
So it emphasizes the importance of regular small doses, especially in cities.
Exactly. You can't just rely on the big vacation once a year. You need those daily interactions built into your urban environment.
And there's some really inspiring examples globally of cities actively trying to create these cities of awe by bringing nature, especially water, back into urban spaces.
Absolutely. The book highlights projects like the revitalization efforts for the Los Angeles River, turning a concrete channel back into a more living system, or the creation of clean public swimming areas right in Copenhagen's harbor.
Amazing.
Efforts to clean up and provide access to rivers like the Anacostia in D.C., and even Wellington, New Zealand's urban snorkel trail in its marine reserve. These show innovative ways cities are integrating blue and green spaces, making nature more accessible and experiential in our daily lives.
It's also really encouraging to see the growth of Community-led initiatives, bottom-up efforts, focus on increasing access to nature within cities.
Yeah, that's crucial too. The rise of grassroots movements like Outdoor Afro, which connects Black communities with nature, or Girl Trek, encouraging walking groups for Black women.
Hmm.
The resurgence of adventure playgrounds that allow for more risky, unstructured play, and the use of tactical urbanism, quick, low-cost interventions to create pop-up parks or green spaces, all highlight this growing desire within communities to reclaim and create nature close to home.
So to kind of bring it all together here at the end,
Mhm.
the key takeaway seems to be that the benefits of nature aren't really an all-or-nothing thing.
Not at all.
They operate along a sort of dose-response curve, right?
Precisely. Even small, regular engagements with the natural world, those daily vegetables, can yield significant positive effects on both our minds and our bodies. Every little bit seems to help.
It really makes you think about your own nature pyramid, doesn't it? Like
Yeah.
personally. Where can you intentionally weave in more frequent and meaningful interactions, even if they're small?
hmm Where are the opportunities in your daily life? Hopefully, this deep dive has maybe prompted you, the listener, to consider the surprising and frankly profound ways nature impacts us. From sharpening our thinking to nurturing our emotional well-being, maybe even challenging some assumptions you had about the environment around you and its importance.
Absolutely. And on that note, here's maybe a final thought for you to mull over. Considering, the increasing urbanization of our world, our undeniable reliance on technology, how can we intentionally design not just our cities, but our own lives and communities to ensure we maintain a vital, ongoing connection with nature?
Yeah, how do we build it in?
Not just for our enjoyment, though that's important, but for our fundamental health, our cognitive function, maybe even our collective sanity.
It's a big question.
It's a question definitely worth exploring in your own life, maybe starting today.